Dell Curry is sitting alone at an isolated table in an empty restaurant in Charlotte. 58 years old. Hands that once threw basketballs with professional precision now tremble holding a yellowed envelope. 30 years. 30 years carrying a weight that no one saw. 30 years hiding a truth that could have changed everything. The envelope is worn at the edges. It has been opened and closed hundreds of times over 3 decades. Each time, Dell almost had the courage to show it. Each time, he backed down. But today is different. Today, there is no turning back. The restaurant door opens. Steph Curry enters. Multiple NBA champion. MVP. Changed the game of basketball. But to Dell, he is just his son. The boy who was once 5 years old and changed his father's life in ways he never imagined. "Hey, Dad." Steph hugs Dell, immediately noticing something is wrong. "You okay? Your phone call was different." Dell gestures to the chair. "Sit down, son. Please." Steph sits, concern clear on his face. "Dad, you're scaring me. Did something happen? Are you sick?" "No." Dell takes a deep breath. The moment he has avoided for 3 decades is finally here. "It's not that. But there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." He pushes the envelope across the table. Yellowed paper. Familiar, but old handwriting. "What's this?" "A letter." Dell can barely form the words. "I wrote it when you were 5 years old. In 1993. 30 years ago." Steph picks up the envelope carefully, as if it might explode. "And in a way, it will. Why didn't you ever show me?" "Because..." Dell pauses, choosing his words. "Because I was afraid. Afraid it would change how you saw yourself, how you saw me. But carrying this alone for 30 years nearly destroyed me. And I realized, hiding this from you is worse than revealing it. Sometimes the greatest love is the sacrifice no one sees." Steph opens the envelope. Thin paper, yellowed with time. The son, first lines written in faded blue ink. "To my son, Steph, who probably will never read this. Today I made the hardest decision of my life. A decision that will shape your future, but break my heart. And you'll never know. No one will." Steph looks at his father. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Dell, tears already in his eyes, the words he has held for 3 decades finally coming out. "Let me tell you what I did. What I never had the courage to tell you." And there, in that empty restaurant, in Charlotte, Dell Curry begins to reveal the secret he has carried for 30 years. A secret about sacrifice, about love, and about the silent price some parents pay so their children can soar. But to understand the weight of this moment, we need to go back. Back to 1993, to a 28-year-old man at the peak of his career facing an impossible choice. A choice that would change 2 destinies forever. Spring of 1993. Dell Curry was in his 7th season in the NBA. Solid player, reliable. The kind the coach calls when he needs a sure shot off the bench. But he wasn't a star, never was, and it ate away at him in ways he never publicly admitted. Charlotte Hornets. Bench player. Good minutes. Respect from his teammates. But always the feeling that he could be more. That he had more inside him. More talent. More potential. He just needed the right chance. And then the chance came. The Detroit Pistons called. A direct offer. They wanted Dell as a starter, not a bench player, a starter. He would be the main shooter. The missing piece in the team. A higher salary, more minutes, more spotlight. Everything Dell secretly desired but never asked for. "This is your chance." his agent, Robert Kim, said enthusiastically. Finally, you're going to be the guy, not just a guy. Dell should have been euphoric. It was what he always wanted. But sitting in that meeting, listening to the details, he could only think of one thing. One person. Steph, his 5-year-old son. At home that night, Dell watched Steph play with a basketball in the backyard. 5 years old, already showing absurd coordination for his age. Already having that love for the game that goes beyond play. It was passion. A gift. Something Dell recognized immediately because he saw it in the mirror, but amplified. Sonia, Dell's wife, noticed her husband's distant look. You're quiet tonight. Did something happen? Detroit made an offer. Sonia froze. Detroit? As a starter? Yes. It should have been a celebration. But Dell's tone was not one of joy. It was one of conflict. That's great, Dell. It's the chance you've always wanted. I know. But, Steph. Sonia looked at her son in the backyard. What about him? He has something, Sonia. Something special. More than I ever had. But he's at a crucial age. If we start moving from city to city, always changing schools, friends, structure, it could affect his development. Or it might not affect him. Or it might. Dell ran a hand over his face. And what if I ruin his chance by pursuing mine? You can sense that there are moments in life where every choice is a loss. There is no right answer, only different consequences. Dell didn't sleep that night. At 3 in the morning, he was in his office doing impossible calculations. If he accepted Detroit, he would earn more. He would be a starter. He would fulfill a personal dream. But he would move Steph away from Charlotte, from school, from friends, from the structure he was beginning to build. And there was something else. Something Dell barely admitted to himself. Fear. Not of failure, but of success. Of becoming a star while his son was still a child. Of creating a dynamic where the father had the spotlight, the son deserved more. Because Dell saw it. He saw Steph's talent. He saw that the 5-year-old boy had the potential to go infinitely further than his father ever did. And part of Dell, a small and shameful part, felt something toxic. Jealousy. Of his own son. At 4 in the morning, Dell picked up paper and pen. He began to write. Not to send, not to show, but to process. To understand what he was feeling. To my son Steph, who probably will never read this. The words flowed. A raw confession of a father struggling with emotions men aren't supposed to admit. Jealousy of his son. Fear of being overshadowed. But also love. Love so deep, he was willing to sacrifice his own dream. Today, I will reject Detroit's offer. I will continue to be a bench player in Charlotte. Because you need stability more than I need spotlight. But the truth that kills me? Part of me wants to accept, wants to shine, wants to be seen. And I'm afraid that if I stay, I'll watch you become everything I wasn't. And I'll feel jealousy. Of my own son. What kind of father feels that? Dell wrote for an hour. When he finished, he read and reread it. Then he sealed it in an envelope. He hid it in a drawer. He would never take it out again. But he would also never throw it away. It was a testament to a moment, to a choice, to a sacrifice no one would see. The next morning, Dell called his agent. I'm going to reject Detroit. What? Dell, are you crazy? It's the chance of a lifetime. I know, but I have my reasons. What reasons? Personal, family. Dell, opportunities like this don't come around twice. I know. And Dell knew. He knew exactly what he was giving up. But my answer is no. He hung up, sat in his empty office, and for the first time in his adult life, Dell Curry cried, not out of sadness, but out of mourning. Mourning for the version of himself he would never be, for the career he would never have, for the recognition that would never come. But when Steph ran into the office minutes later, ball in hand, smile on his face, asking his dad to play, Dell wiped away his tears, smiled, picked up the ball, and went out to the backyard to train with his son. No one ever knew. Not even Sonia knew the full details. Dell carried it alone, as he thought parents should do, in silence, without complaint, without validation. The greatest sacrifice is not what you do. It's what you feel while doing it. In the restaurant, 30 years later, Steph finished reading the letter, tears streaming freely down his face, hands trembling holding the paper that revealed a truth he never imagined. "Dad," his voice broke, You turned down Detroit for my sake?" "Yes." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Dell looked at his own hands, hands that once held that choice alone. "Because I didn't want you to feel guilty. I didn't want you to play basketball for me. I wanted you to love the game for you, not out of debt to a father who sacrificed his career." "But 30 years, Dad. You carried this alone for 30 years? It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. And was it?" Silence. Dell took a deep breath. "I don't know, Steph. Honestly, I don't know. Would I do it again? Yes, without a doubt. But did it hurt? Every day. It still hurts." Steph reread parts of the letter, the parts about jealousy, about fear of being overshadowed, about mourning for a career not lived. "You wrote here that you felt jealousy. Of me." "I felt it." Dell forced honesty. "I still feel it sometimes." The air grew heavy with that admission. Because it was taboo. Parents aren't supposed to feel jealousy of their children, especially when they've sacrificed for them. "Dad, I didn't know. I never noticed." "Because I hid it well. I became an expert at hiding." Dell picked up a napkin, dried his own eyes. "But you know what's worse than feeling jealousy? It's feeling guilt for feeling jealousy. It's knowing that you love your son more than anything, but still, in dark moments, asking yourself, why him and not me? It's impossible not to feel it when someone gives you a truth so raw it hurts just to hear it." "There were times," Dell continued, the words coming out in a torrent now. 3 decades of silence breaking. "There were times, watching you play, seeing you dominate, seeing you do things I never could. And I felt pride, so much pride my chest ached. But I also felt loss, mourning, because every achievement of yours was a reminder of what I gave up." "Dad." "No." Dell raised his hand. "Let me finish, because if I don't say it all now, I'll never say it. There was a game. You were 16, state championship. You scored 42 points, destroyed the opposing team. And I was in the stands, everyone congratulating me. Your son is incredible. He's going to be a professional." And I smiled, thanked them. But inside, I was breaking. Because all I could see was everything I could have been. If I had accepted Detroit, if I had chosen differently. Steph was in shock, seeing his father in a completely new light. No longer the strong and reserved father, but a complex man, flawed, human, carrying a pain no one saw for 30 years. "But there's another part of the story." Dell looked directly into Steph's eyes. A part I only realized years later. Maybe my choice wasn't just about protecting you. Maybe it was also about protecting myself. What do you mean? Maybe I knew, deep down, that you were more talented than me. And accepting Detroit, becoming a starter, would expose that. It would mean having to confront that my son was better. So by staying in Charlotte, being a bench player, I could pretend it was a choice, not a limitation. Have you ever wondered how much of our generosity is genuine and how much is defense? I don't know anymore what was noble and what was cowardice, Dell admitted. I carried it as a heroic sacrifice. But what if it was just fear? Fear of trying and failing? Fear of being overshadowed? Steph remained quiet, processing, reframing his entire childhood, his entire life, in the light of this truth. Do you remember? Steph began slowly. When I was 12, you woke me up at 6 in the morning on a Saturday, took me to an empty court, trained with me for 4 hours straight, more intense than ever. When we finished, you were crying. You said it was sweat. Dell closed his eyes. I remember. What was that, Dad? That day, Dell opened his eyes, red now. It was the 10th anniversary of my refusal to Detroit. 10 years. And I was watching you dominate, seeing you be everything I dreamed of being. And it was beautiful. And it was torture. I wanted you to feel my pride. But I also wanted you to feel my pain, without having to say it. Why didn't you ever say it? Because parents aren't supposed to say these things, Dell said, echoing a belief of an entire generation. Parents are supposed to be strong. They're supposed to sacrifice in silence. They're supposed to carry the weight so their children don't have to. But what if the weight becomes too heavy? Then you carry it for another 30 years. Dell tried to laugh, but it came out as a sob. Until it finally breaks you. And here we are. Steph picked up the letter. Again. Reread it. This time with new understanding. It wasn't just about sacrifice. It was about the complexity of love. About how we can love someone deeply and still feel difficult emotions. Jealousy, resentment, regret. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you regret it? Staying? How much does a father hide to protect a son? Dell thought, really thought. Do I regret the decision? No. I'd do it all over again. Because I look at you and I see it worked. You became everything I dreamed of and more. Much more. But do I regret how I handled it? Hiding it? Carrying it alone? Yes. Every day. Because that silence nearly killed me. What do you mean? Steph, do you know how many nights I stayed up watching your highlights? Not out of pride, but out of torture. Wondering, if I had gone to Detroit, if I had had my chance, would I have been like this? Better? Worse? And I'll never know. Because I chose to secure your path instead of risking mine. And that hurts you? Does it hurt that you became great? No, never. Does it hurt that I never found out how great I could have been? Yes, always. And feeling these two things at the same time, that's what nearly destroyed me. They sat in silence, father and son, separated by a table, united by a truth finally revealed after 3 decades of silence. Thank you, Steph said finally. For what? For telling me? For finally trusting me with this? I should have told you a long time ago. Maybe. Steph carefully folded the letter. Or maybe now was the right time, when I'm mature enough to understand, to hold this without breaking. Dell looked at his son. No longer the 5-year-old boy. A man now, with his own children, with his own story. And he realized Steph could hold this, could carry it together. Finally, Dell didn't have to carry it alone. "Can I keep the letter?" Steph asked. "It was always yours. It just took me 30 years to deliver it." Steph carefully put the letter away. "I need to process all of this. My whole life. Everything seems different now. Worse? No. More real. More human. You stopped being the perfect father in my head and became a real person. And that's liberating, in a way. True love sometimes is carrying pain alone, but it's also having the courage to finally share it." They left the restaurant that night, not as they entered. Something had changed. A layer of formality that had always existed between them cracked, replaced by something deeper, more real, more painful, but also more true. Steph drove home in silence, his mind processing, replaying his entire life, every moment with his father under a new light, and he began to notice patterns he had never seen before. Like every time Steph failed in a game, Dell seemed almost relieved? Not happy, but relieved, as if his son's failure proved his sacrifice was valid, that his son was human, not a god, that he hadn't given up everything for nothing, or how Dell never went to any of Steph's games in an empty arena, always with a crowd. Because the crowd distracted. The crowd allowed Dell to feel complex emotions without being watched. Alone in an empty arena, face to face with his son's talent, would have been too direct a confrontation. Or how Dell always trained Steph with an intensity that bordered on punishment. Not because he wanted to hurt him, but because every training session was an exorcism. It was Dell working out his own demons through his son, transferring a pain he couldn't express in words. Steph arrived home. Isha, his wife, noticed immediately. "The dinner with your father, how did it go?" "He told me something that changed everything." "What?" And Steph told her the whole story. The offer from Detroit, the refusal, the 30 years of silence, the jealousy, the guilt, the complexity of paternal love no one talks about. Isha listened in silence. In the end, she only said, "My God, he carried that alone for 30 years?" "Yes." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I need to do something. He gave me everything, literally, and suffered in silence. I need to validate that somehow." In the following days, Steph couldn't stop thinking. Every trophy in his house had a new meaning. It wasn't just his, it was theirs, a shared conquest, a shared sacrifice, even if only one received the spotlight. And then Steph had an idea that would honor his father in a way Dell had never received, not from a team, not from the media, but from his son, from his family. He began to plan an event, not for millions, but for the people who mattered, and to finally give Dell the validation he never asked for, but always deserved. 3 weeks later, Dell received a call from Steph. "Dad, I need you to come to Oakland next Saturday." "Why?" "Surprise, but it's important. Can you come?" "Of course, son." Dell had no idea what was coming. He thought it would be a family dinner. Something small. But when he arrived at the Warriors gym that Saturday, he saw something different. Bleachers full. Not of strangers, but of familiar faces. Family. Friends. Former teammates. Selected media. "Steph, what is this?" "You'll see." They took Dell to the court. Center. A microphone was set up. Steph went to the microphone first, cleared his throat. The audience fell silent. "Thank you all for coming," Steph began, his voice already choked up. "You are here because today we are going to honor someone. Someone who never asked to be honored, who never asked for recognition, who carried a weight in silence for 30 years. Dell, on the sidelines, began to understand, his heart racing. "You know my story," Steph continued. "Son of an NBA player, raised in Charlotte, learned the game from my father. But what you don't know, what I didn't know until 3 weeks ago, is my father's full story." And then Steph told it. Everything. The offer from Detroit in 1993. Dell's choice to turn it down. The 30 years of silence. The sacrifice no one saw. The pain no one validated. The audience was in absolute silence. Many crying. Because it was a universal story. A story of parents who sacrifice, who choose their children over their own dreams, who carry weights in silence because they believe that's what love requires. Naturally, this leads us to something profound. The greatest sacrifices are those that no one sees. My father gave me everything. Steph, tears now streaming down his face. Literally everything. Not just structure, not just training, but a future. He gave up his for mine, and he did it in silence, without asking for anything in return, without validation, without recognition. Steph turned to Dell. "Dad, you spent 30 years thinking this was weakness, that feeling jealousy was failure, that having regrets was being a bad father. But you're wrong. All of that makes you human. And what makes you a hero is not never feeling those things. It's feeling them and choosing love anyway." Dell was crying openly now. 3 decades of contained emotions finally released. "So, today," Steph gestured to the screen behind him, "today we are going to retire a number, but not in the traditional way. It's not a team retirement. It's a family retirement." The screen lit up. 2 shirts side by side. Dell's number 30, Steph's number 30. United. "Dad, your number is as much mine as my number is yours, because everything I achieved, it was built on the sacrifice you made, and it's time the world knew about it." The audience exploded in applause. Dell could barely stand. Steph went to him, hugged him, and whispered in his ear, "Thank you, Dad, for everything, and I'm sorry it took me 30 years to understand." The hug lasted minutes. Father and son. 3 decades of silence finally broken. 3 decades of pain finally validated. After the event, when the media left, and only the family remained, Dell and Steph sat on the bench. Empty court, like that morning when Steph was 12. "You didn't have to do this," Dell said. "I had to. You carried it alone for too long. But now everyone knows about the jealousy, about the regrets." "So what?" Steph turned to his father. "Does that make you less? No. It makes you human. And the world needs to see that heroes are human, that fathers are flawed, that love isn't perfection. It's a daily choice, despite imperfection." Dell looked at the retired shirts on the screen, side by side. "I still feel it sometimes, you know. The jealousy. Not always. But sometimes I watch you play and think, what if it had been me?" "I know. And that doesn't hurt you?" "No," Steph answered honestly, "because now I understand. It's not about me. It's about you processing the choice you made. And I'd rather have an honest father with complex emotions than a father pretending to be perfect. The greatest legacy is not what we achieve. It's what we sacrifice so others can achieve." "Can you do something for me?" Steph asked. "Anything. Stop carrying it alone. From now on, when you feel jealousy, regret, pain, talk to me. We share. You don't have to be strong alone anymore." Dell, for the first time in 30 years, felt the weight lifting. Not completely? Maybe never completely. But enough. Enough to breathe. I'd love that. They sat in silence. Comfortable now. Not heavy. Just father and son. Two men with complicated stories. With complex emotions. But united by something stronger than all of that. Love. Imperfect love. Honest love. Real love. Weeks later, veteran journalist James Wilson managed to get a rare interview with Dell, the first since the revelation. The last question was the one everyone wanted to know. Dell, after everything that has come to light, do you regret the choice you made in 1993? Dell thought. Really thought. Not an automatic response, but a genuine consideration. Do I regret the decision? No. I look at Steph, at the man he's become, at the father he is, and I know it worked. It was worth it. But do I regret hiding it, carrying it alone? Yes, because sacrifice without validation is a weight that crushes, and I almost let it crush me. What changed? Steph gave me permission to be human, to feel complicated things, to be a flawed father and still a loving father, and that freed me from the prison I built for myself. What advice would you give to parents who sacrifice for their children? Dell looked directly into the camera. Sacrifice is beautiful, but silence about sacrifice is poison. If you're carrying a weight, share it. Not with your child as a burden, but as a human. Because honesty, even if painful, is better than silent martyrdom. Always. The interview went viral, millions of views, not because of scandal, but because of truth. Truth about the complexity of parental love, about how we can make right choices for the right reasons and still suffer, about how sacrifice does not cancel pain, and pain does not cancel love. Other athletes began to open up. Parent athletes sharing their own stories, their own sacrifices, their own silent pains. The culture began to change, slowly. From parents must be strong in silence to parents must be honest about struggle. And it all started with a yellowed envelope, with a 30-year-old letter, with a father finally having the courage to show his son that heroes also break, also doubt, also feel jealousy, and still choose love. A year later, Steph was giving an interview promoting a new project. Journalist Sarah Mitchell asked an unexpected question. Your father revealed he felt jealousy of you. How did that affect your relationship? Steph smiled. Not an uncomfortable smile, a genuine smile. It improved. Drastically. How so? Because now my father is human to me. Not an icon, not a perfect hero, but a real person with real feelings. And I can relate to a real person in a way I could never relate to an icon. Before, I had a father on a pedestal. Now I have a real father, and I prefer that. Wasn't it painful to discover he felt jealousy? It was, at first. But then I realized jealousy doesn't cancel love. He could feel both, and he did. And he chose love every day despite feeling jealousy. And that's more impressive than never feeling jealousy. Because anyone can love when it's easy. He loved when it was hard, when it cost him dearly, and he kept loving. What lesson do you take from this? Steph thought. That perfection is an illusion. That real love is a daily choice despite imperfection. And that secrets, even well-intentioned, hurt more than truth. My father hid it for 30 years to protect me. But in the revelation, I discovered I didn't need protection. I needed truth. He paused. And I learned that I'll do it differently with my children. I'll sacrifice, yes, but I'll be honest about the cost. Because they deserve a human father, not a silent martyr. Sarah nodded. Your father watched this interview. Do you want to say something to him? Steph looked directly into the camera. Dad, thank you. Not just for the sacrifice, but for finally telling me. You taught me 2 lessons. First, love sometimes means giving up your dreams for someone else's dreams. Second, but love also means being honest about the cost. You did both, and I love you for both. Dell watched at home, alone. He cried, but not out of sadness, out of liberation. 3 decades carrying a weight, 1 year sharing it, and finally, breathing freely. He picked up the envelope, that 30-year-old letter. He reread it for the last time. Then, carefully, he placed it in a frame. Not to hide, but to honor. To honor a moment, a choice, a pain, and a liberation that came 3 decades later. He hung it in his office, a permanent reminder, not of sacrifice, but of the fact that silence about sacrifice is an unbearable weight. And truth, even 30 years late, is liberating. And when people asked about the frame, about the old letter, Dell told them, not with shame, but with pride. Pride not of the sacrifice, but of the courage to finally share it. Because he learned, greatness is not carrying a weight alone. It's having the courage to share it. And then, it's teaching others to do the same. The phone rang. Steph. Hey, Dad. Hey, son. I was thinking. Want to train with me tomorrow? Just us 2. Empty court. Like old times. Dell smiled, but this time without hidden pain, without suppressed jealousy. Just pure joy. I'd love to. Dad? Yes? I love you. And thank you for finally letting me carry it together. Thank you for wanting to carry it. They hung up, and for the first time in 30 years, Dell Curry felt complete peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because he was no longer alone in it. And that, in the end, is all anyone needs. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of someone willing to hold it together. Sometimes the greatest love is the sacrifice no one sees. But sometimes the greatest love is having the courage to let others see it, to share the weight, to be vulnerable. Dell learned both, and Steph learned by watching. And future generations will learn from both. That heroes are human, that parents are flawed, that love isn't perfection. It's a choice, a daily choice, an honest choice, a shared choice, and that it's never, ever too late for truth, even after 30 years.